Well, good afternoon, folks, as always, and as always, greetings to you folks out there who may listen to this later. Of all the goings-on in our nation and around the world, all the crazy, stupid stuff going on in Washington, it's hard to get up and speak and not fall on the subjects of politics and government. Since all this is going on. So today I'd like to address government a little bit. And we'll stay out of politics as much as we can. I don't know if you've ever thought about it. I don't know if you've ever thought about it much. But there must of necessity be some form of government in order to have some kind of stability in the lives of men. God, when he was leading the Israelites out of Egypt, he set up a government. They had certain things that they had to do. He gave them the statutes and judgments and things to go by, so he set up a government. Now, some governments provide more stability than others. And some governments provide hardly any stability at all. Some governments work for the people more or less, which they should do. That's the purpose of a government. And some governments, they just use the people for their own self-existence and selfish reasons. And some governments on this earth are downright evil people. They are downright evil. We have seen that through history. But there has always been governments on this earth, no matter how little or how big. Some were national governments and some were family governments, such as it was with our father Abraham. He had his own family government. But there has always been rules to abide by from somebody. You can't escape it. It has to be that way. It's always been that way. We in this country have a national government. Then you have your state government under that. And then you have your county government under that. Right on down, to certain rules and regulations within your own family. At least that's the way it should be. Some families have no rules or regulations. Government has always existed, and of necessity, we must have it, or there will be total lawlessness or anarchy, which is what anarchy means. There will be total social disorder, complete social disorder without government. There are many forms of government in the earth today. And lately, we've heard the word socialism from all the left-wing politicians in this country who are striving to become president. We hear this word socialism, this push that they have towards a socialist government. Well, what is a socialist government? What does it consist of? Well, there are several kinds of socialist governments on this earth with variations. First of all, there's a dictatorship. People think that could never happen in this country. But it could, people. It could. Once you get that form of government in, you disarm everybody. It's easy for a dictatorship to come on the scene. A dictatorship is a government in which absolute power is exercised by one person without the consent of the people. Absolutely and overbearing power and control. Dictatorship is a form of socialist government. And then there's communism. It's also a form of a socialist government. Communism is a theory or a system of social organization based on the holding of all property in common. Actual ownership being ascribed to the community as a whole or to the state. Now that's the definition of it. Don't always work that way though. Usually doesn't. Communism is a system of social organization by a totalitarian state dominated by a single and self-perpetuating political party. Not just one person, but a party, a certain party, which is what we see some of these people pushing towards today in our own government. Now, Adolf Hitler was not a communist, but nevertheless, the Nazi Party was a form of a totalitarian government, or it was a form of socialism. And let's never forget, Adolf Hitler was elected into power. He was elected into power. But a totalitarian government recognizes no other political party but itself. And that's what some of these people are seeking today. They want to be elected into power to impose their form of government upon you. So communism is a form of government. It's no more than an elaborated form of dictatorship. The difference being, instead of one person being in absolute power, you have one party in power, in absolute power. And as I said, both of these governments are socialist forms of government. Is that what we want? Is that what we want? Oh, they paint a pretty picture. Free this, free that, free medical benefits, free college tuition, going to clean up the environment. And I know the environment needs cleaning up. That's a fact. But they promise all these things. Everything is going to be solar powered. No more combustion engines. No more gasoline engines. And how are they going to pay for it? They said, well, we're going to tax the oil companies to pay for it. How stupid can you be? If you do away with combustion engines, you do away with the oil companies. So there's not going to be anyone to tax. But people buy into that crazy stuff. Then there is a monarchy form of government, which is a hereditary sovereign, where the office, or leadership is passed down from one to another in the same family. And most of the time, they have family members appointed to lesser offices in that government. And although the monarch designates power to other people, those people must always answer to him. This is also a type of socialism. And then you have a democracy. You have a government by the people. At least that's how it's written down. It don't always work that way. But it's supposed to be a government by the people, a form of government which the supreme power is vested in the people and is exercised by them or by their elected agents under a free electoral system. A state in which the head of government is an elected or nominated president and not a monarch, and he's not a monarch. But you see these socialists trying to be elected. They want to use the democratic system to be elected into power. And once in power, they are going to do away with democracy. That's the way the socialist people, the socialist dictators, or the socialist form of government always works, always has worked. Look down through history. Of course, there are tribal forms of government also in Africa and other parts of the world. You know, God instituted government, but He doesn't necessarily endorse what's going on the earth today. There are many different forms of government on the earth. Now, as I said, God Himself instituted government. But does He endorse any of the governments that we've just looked at or went over? Does He endorse any of those governments today? And exactly what form of government did God institute? Is God a socialist? Is God's government a dictatorship? After all, He does have absolute power, like a dictator, in a dictator form of government. But He doesn't rule with overbearing power and control, does He? He doesn't force His will on you like a dictator does. So, God is not a dictator. Is God a communist? I mean, after all, He does own everything, you know. As the communists do. They own all the land and everything. And God is self-perpetuating and has always been and always will be. But you see, God does not belong to any political party. So God is not a communist either. I know people will say, I know God's government is a democracy. After all, you know, it is my God-given right to vote. It is my God-given obligation to vote, as some people say. Even, you know, if the only thing I can do is vote for the lesser of two evils, I've got to vote. And you know, in our democratic form of government, that's about all you've got. You've got two parties, you know, but you go vote for one, you're still voting for the lesser of two evils sometimes. But they've just got to do it. Well, folks, sin is sin and evil is evil, and God is neither. I've heard people say that. But you see, it's not God that gives you the right to vote. It's your government that gives you the right to vote, that gives you that right. And even then, it's not a right, it's a privilege. For many don't have that privilege. And while it's true, God's government is for the people, it's not by the people. Therefore, God's government is not a democracy either. Now, our democracy, the way it functions, or the way it's supposed to function, is probably one of the better governments on this earth as far as taking care of the people. But, you know, it's still not God's form of government. And that may hurt some people's feelings, and I'm sorry if it does. But nevertheless, it's the truth. Now, before I go any farther, or further, however you want to look at it, I don't want anyone thinking that Arden Taylor is rebelling against his government, because I'm not. Because I am thankful, and all of you should be thankful as well, that we live in the United States of America. I'm not always proud to be an American by what our government does, and a lot of people does. But I sure am thankful. I sure am thankful. I'm thankful because of all the blessings God has bestowed on this nation and me and you. I'm thankful that you and I can sit in this room today and that we don't have to fear someone coming through that door, and carting us away to never be seen again for worshiping our Lord and Savior. Now, that may come to pass, but it's not. We have that privilege to come here and to worship. Of course, you never know when some idiot's going to come open the door and start shooting anymore, but so far we have that privilege to do that. We have a right, according to law, to do that. And I want everybody to know that I believe God had a hand in the affairs of man and the founding fathers who created this democracy. Even though democracy is not God's form of government, I believe that He had a hand and worked with those people that drew up the original Constitution of our nation. For it has worked better than anything else down through the ages and on earth today. But that does not necessarily mean He puts His stamp of approval on a democracy or republic form of government. Many people think that we, here in America, invented democracy. Well, that's not so. Democratic forms of government were in existence long before we ever came on the scene as a nation. The Greeks had a democracy form of government. Now, not exactly like ours, but it was a democracy. The Romans had a democratic form of government also. There was variations in it, of course, than what we have, but nevertheless, it was a democratic form of government. Well, the Greek Empire no longer exists, friends. The Roman Empire no longer exists. Their system of government finally failed them. Their democratic form of government failed them. So instead of God putting His stamp of approval on the way we govern ourselves, maybe, just maybe, He's allowing us to live under this system long enough to prove to ourselves that it doesn't work either. It's something to think about. Something to think about. It may be the best the world has, but eventually it will fail us, folks. It will fail us. God's government is a government of peace, as opposed to Satan's government of rebellion, war, strife, and confusion. Look at the politicians today up there in Washington. I mean, you see rebellion and strife and confusion, and one trying to take completely over the government. But God's government is not like that. Let's go to Isaiah 59. Let me turn over there. Isaiah 59. Let's see here. Well, let's start in verse 1. It says, "Behold, the Lord's hand is not shortened, that it cannot save, neither His ear heavy, that it cannot hear. but your iniquities have separated between you and your God. And for those of us in the church, now the people out here can't see that. But we in the church can see that. We can see things happening to this nation, our nation. And we know it's happening because of our iniquities. That's the reason that it's happening. It says, your iniquities have separated between you and your God, and your sins have hid his face from you, that he will not hear. And, we murder all these little children, and as mentioned before services there, this abortion doctor had over 2,000 fetuses stored in his garage where he had aborted, and I believe it was within a 2-year period of time that he did that. That many in a 2-year period of time. That man is a cold-blooded murderer, people. But things like that, God hides his face from us for doing such things and not doing something about it. The government should have been doing something about that. But it is in our government, we have laws that permits stuff like that. He says, your hands are defiled with blood. Well, that's a fact. And your fingers with iniquity. Your lips have spoken lies. Never hear the truth from any politicians and anybody else hardly anymore. Your tongue has muttered perverseness. None calls for justice, nor any pleads for the truth. They trust in vanity and speak lies and conceive mischief and brings forth iniquity. We can look around us and we see that happening. Those of us in the church can see that more clearly than most anyone else. It says they hatch cockatrice eggs and weave the spider's web. He that eats of their eggs dies, and that which is crushed breaks out into a viper. Their webs shall not become garments, neither shall they cover themselves with their works. Their works are works of iniquity, and the acts of violence is in their hands. Their feet run to evil, and they make haste to shed innocent blood. And you can see that. Look at these big cities, and it's spilling over into the rural areas now. That people, they run to do evil, and they make haste to shed innocent blood. Look at all these shootings and stuff that we've been having. Shedding innocent blood. It says their thoughts are thoughts of iniquity. Wasting and destruction are in their paths. The way of peace they know not, and there is no judgment in their goings. They have made them crooked paths. Whoever goes therein shall not know peace. Therefore is judgment far from us. If you ever had any dealings in the court system, you will know that justice is far from us, people. There is no justice in the court systems anymore. And if there is, it takes months and years sometime for that justice to be brought about. It says, therefore is justice far from us. Neither does justice overtake us. We wait for light, but we behold obscurity. We wait for brightness, but we walk in darkness. We in the church can see that clearly by the people going on around us. It says we grope for the wall like the blind, and we grope as if we had no eyes. We stumble at noonday as in the night. We are in desolate places as dead men. We roar all like bears and mourn sore like doves. We look for judgment, but there is none. There is no judgment. We look for salvation, but it is far off from us. For our transgressions, again, he tells us why. Our transgressions have multiplied before you, and our sins testify against us. For our transgressions are with us, and as for our iniquities, we know them. Well, the transgressions, they testified against Sodom and Gomorrah, didn't they? And they finally caught up with them. Got to the point that their transgressions came to the point that God destroyed them. And that's slowly what is happening to us people. And we read in the Bible that when God unleashes his government on this earth, there's going to be a very small remain left people. That's all. All because of our transgressions. Verse 13, in transgressions and lyings against the Lord, and departing away from our God, speaking oppression and revolt, conceiving and uttering from the heart words of falsehood. Well, you see that in the religious community out there. Lying against God and departing from the way of God, from his laws and commandments. It says, and judgment is turned away backward, and justice stands afar off, for truth has fallen in the street, and equity cannot enter. Yea, truth falls, and he that departs from evil makes himself a prey. And the Lord saw it, and it displeased him that there was no judgment. And that's what God looks on this. When he looks on this nation, he doesn't see any true justice going on. Verse 16, and he saw that there was no man, and wondered that there was no intercessor. Therefore, his arm brought salvation unto him, and his righteousness sustained him. He looks. God has looked for somebody, but there's no true intercessor for us. Now, I know our president has done things that has caused our economy to grow, and he's done this and he's done that, but still, he will not face the abortion issue. He will not face the gay rights and all that stuff. Nobody, no politician will touch that. So God says he can find no one, no true intercessor for true justice. Mankind does not know how to rule himself, folks. God's people and God's nation don't know how to rule themselves. And that's the reason our form of government will finally fail us. No man-made government will work. None of them. This one may be better than most, but it won't work either in the end. Simply because its foundations are based upon the wrong principles. No nation, no government can stand because the principles of falsehood and greed is what rules it. That is what motivates the people who are pushing for a socialist form of government in our nation. They want complete power for their party. And in order to do that, the first thing they need to do is confiscate your guns. We say our people is by the people and of the people and for the people. Do we really think our government is by the people? Well, we go and vote for someone to represent us, but once we vote them in to office, then they can go and vote any way they want to in regards to policy making, whether it's the people's will or not. Then we have to vote them out and someone else in, hoping they will do better. But seemingly they never do. Do we really think that our government is for the people? Well, that depends on which people you're talking about. Now, I know we have all kinds of different departments in our governments. Department of this and department of that. Some good, some bad. For example, we have a Department of Transportation that builds and maintains our roadways and highways. The roads and highways has dramatically improved since I was a child, especially in the rural areas of this nation. That's good. That's good. But what about our educational system? Well, to put it mildly, our education system stinks, folks. It stinks anymore. The colleges are turning out these people who are pure radicals and rebels. And there's a reason for that. You know, we are no longer the best educated people in the world simply because we no longer allow God in the classroom. We've thrown him away. If we only look back, we can see our education system has gone downhill since our elected officials banned praying and teaching about God and God's principles in our schools. It's gone downhill ever since. And now it's to the point that if I had children, I wouldn't even send them to college. You know, but that was the turning point, folks, right there, when they put God out of the schools, out of the educational system. And I ask again, do you really think your government is for the people? And I'm talking about all the people, not just for a few elite rich folks. I'm not talking about corporate America. I'm talking about everybody. Is the government for everybody? Ask yourself, has my government made my life better in the last year, 2 years, or 4 years? And people may say, well, yeah, it has. The economy's better, this and that and other. But how is your life, you know, when it comes to morality? Is it improved any? No, it hasn't. We look, but we see the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And that's a true statement. Simply because the laws of God are made and set up by the wealthy for the wealthy, to benefit the wealthy. Oh, they may scatter a few crumbs around to keep people happy, to keep the votes coming in, but it's mostly for the wealthy. That's the way it is. That's the way it's always been. And always will be until the return of Jesus Christ. When have you had a really good tax break? I mean, now, the party that's in now, they have given people tax breaks. They have given corporations some good tax breaks. And that helps the economy. But when have you had a really good tax break? We're taxed every way we're turned, people. You're taxed when you make money. They tax you again when you spend it. And there's all kinds of taxes on car tires, whiskey, and cigarettes, and for those that smoke, and all this stuff. They're banning e-cigarettes now because they say they're causing harm to people. And maybe they are. But what about all of the people that smokes tobacco, people? They should get rid of tobacco. Tobacco's caused more deaths, more sickness than e-cigarettes has ever thought about doing. They should get rid of all of it. Not just the e-cigarettes. But you see, there's a reason. They get millions and millions, multiple millions of dollars in tax money off of tobacco. They don't get nothing off the e-cigarettes. So they'll get rid of them, but they won't mention getting rid of tobacco. Not at all. And I'm not endorsing either one, by the way. I've never used an e-cigarette, but if they're harmful to people, then they should be gotten rid of, but so should the tobacco. Well, once again, I want to stress the point that I'm not anti-government or anti-American. I am thankful to have been born an American. As poor as I consider myself to be, I am far richer than the majority of the world. Most of us are. I have a vehicle. I have 2 vehicles. I have a house, a bed, and a pillow and clothes. Have plenty of food. Well, I don't know. I'm kind of short on food. You can look at me and see that I don't get much to eat, but you know, but we have more food in this country and a more variety of food than anybody else in the world, and we still complain about it. As flawed as our government is, it's still the best this world has to offer as of now, and I'm thankful to live under this system, even though as flawed as it is. But people, our government and our world is on a downhill slide, and there is no turning back. Of course, we in the church can see that, but people out there can't see it. They think everything is going to exist just the way it is forever. My brother's like that. He thinks everything's just going to go on, and our government, you know, is going to take care of everything. The point I'm trying to make is that no government, how well you may think of it, it's not going to last. It will eventually fail its citizens because we do not possess the knowledge to govern ourselves with. We don't govern ourselves off of the right foundation. We don't use God's government. And if the government is not of God, if it is not built upon His laws, it will not last. Now, when our democracy started, it was based upon the laws of God. But all of that's been thrown away. All these amendments has gradually pushed the laws of God out of our system. And that's the reason we are going downhill. So what is God's government? He's not a communist. He's not a dictator. So, you know, he's not a monarch. So what type of government is God's government? And what is it that makes God's government so different than anything we have on earth today? God's government is truly for the people, but it is not by the people, is it? It is definitely not by the people, but it is for the people. It's not by the people because what the people want is not always good for the people, is it? We see all these crazy laws passed that the people want, but it's devastating to us. It's not good for us, a lot of these things. That's what's wrong with democracy. We want our government to pass all these laws to allow us to do things that actually hurt us instead of helping us. It hurts us as individuals and as a nation, a lot of these things. You know, and I'm talking about laws which permit abortion, which is murder. You know, and homosexuality and all that stuff. Homosexuality is an abomination. It's a detestable thing in the eyes of God. But the people wants it. So our legislators pass laws making it legal. Everybody wants to, almost every nation or state in the union has passed laws making marijuana legal, not just for medical reasons, but a lot of them has passed laws to make it okay for recreational use, because they are finally figured out a way to get tax money off of it. Up to that point, it was totally illegal. But if they can get money off of it, they'll make it legal. Well, God's government, it resembles a monarchy, but it's really not a monarchy either, and I'll explain the difference. A true monarchy has one person at the top. Say a king, for instance, and all lesser offices are appointed by the king. Well, God does, he's going to do that too. Now, he does this mostly to members of his family or his close friends, and they are to answer back to him. That's a monarchy. But God's government is not a monarchy, it's an aristocratic form of government. And I want to give you the definition to that also. Aristocratic form of government is a government or state ruled by an elite or privileged class. A class of persons holding exceptional rank and privileges, especially the hereditary nobility. A governing body composed of the best or most able men in the state. A class or group considered to be superior to everyone else. Now, that may rub some people the wrong way. But let's take a closer look. God's government here on this earth, when Christ returns, will be composed of an elite and privileged class of people. That's the first fruits, folks. That's us, hopefully. They're called the first fruits of God. We will hold exceptional rank and privileges as the very children of God our Father and brothers and sisters of Jesus Christ. We will be, as the definition says, of nobility. Romans 8:15 through 17 states this very fact, that we have received the spirit of sonship, that we are the children of God, heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ. And also, if you want to jot down Hebrews 6:17, it says God has confirmed this with an oath, and says it is impossible. Verse 18 says it is impossible for God to lie. So every position or job in the government of God will be given to the person most able, as the definition says, to perform it or oversee it. And we will be a superior class. How could we not be? We will be spirit beings in the government of God. So we would be a superior class of people. God's government is a cooperation, folks. And every position in that cooperation or corporation is a member of the same family. These facts alone should drive us to strive for what God has called us for, what He's called us to do. We have been called and set aside, set apart, if you will, for a very special reason. But God's not going to force it on us. That's the difference right there. We have to really want it. And who in their right mind would not want it? But there are some that make you wonder, don't they? So what can we do? What do we do as Christians? Can we as true Christians really make a difference in national and world government now? Well, we could if we would all band together and really try, but you see, that's not going to happen either. Because God's people has more different opinions than the politicians do, it would seem sometimes. And we can't agree on anything long enough to get anything done. We can do very little as Christians at this time because of our divisions. I wished I could stop the murder of the most helpless and innocent of our society, little unborn children, but I can't. I wished I could stop the abducting of children and murder and mistreatment of the elderly, but I can't. I'd like to stop the wars and the drug abuses and the AIDS crisis and all these other devastating diseases and cancer, but I can't at this time because I don't have the resources to do that at this time. But our time is coming, folks, if we really seek it. And then we will have all the power in the universe to back us up to do these things. No government on this earth, folks, can bring us salvation. None of them. A lot of people think their political party can bring them salvation, but they can't. No government on this earth can bring peace and happiness, true peace and happiness. No government on this earth will ever right all the wrongs on this earth. They may right some of the wrongs, but for every wrong that they right, there's another wrong that pops up, it would seem. World government is the reason the world is in the shape it's in today. It's because of these different crazy governments. Now, I don't know how you view yourself politically. You may be a Republican or Democrat or an independent. I'm neither. But first of all, we need to view ourselves as Christians people above all government affiliations. We need to view ourselves as Christians, followers of Christ, and do what the things that Christ said to do. Go by His laws and His commandments and His judgments. If we really want to get involved in government, let's get involved in the only government that will ever make a difference. That is the government of God. If you really want to get involved in government. For no form of government instituted by man can bring happiness to this world. No form of socialist government, in whatever package it may come in, can bring happiness. And our own democracy or democratic system will also eventually fail because of the wicked hearts and demands of the people. So again, if you just have to be involved in some sort of government, make it the government of God.